Well, welcome everyone. We're here at the Olympic Village, welcoming you all to CanU this year. It's September 2020, and we're just seeing the sun peek up here to wash the village with light. Of course, we paid a lot of attention to sun angles as we thought about this mid-rise development here, but it's great to have you all with us today on a virtual tour. My name is Scot Hein. I was a senior urban designer with the City of Vancouver for this project, but let me just first say it took a village. We had thousands of folks working on this project, including at one point, as I recall, about 300 architects drawing concurrently. It's a crazy project, daunting timeline to meet Van Ock's requirements to start to move bedding in for the Athletes Village. Of course, hosting not only the Olympic Games, but the Paralympic Games as well. So we had only about 3 years to design and build this place. And with also the interest to elevate our best practices, to really showcase sustainability and motivate new best practices throughout the city, which I'll speak of later on in the tour. Here we are at the plaza. You can see beyond me False Creek, last waterfront site here in False Creek. This is the first of really 3 neighborhoods here at the Olympic Village. We also know this village as the Shipyard neighborhood, and we know that because we can look and we can see these beautiful ship ribs, if you will, that adorn the plaza. They're part of the armature of the place that helps us set up for various ceremony and programmings. These were designed by Norm Hodson and PFS landscape architects. To give you a sense of the pace of development, we designed this plaza in about 3 weeks. The project itself, as a Shipyard's neighborhood, about 1,100 units. This is a $1 billion project. And a little over 1 million square feet. So a big project to do at one moment in time. This started out pre-Olympic announcement as a tower podium idea, as we see typically with North False Creek. I think you had a tour with Larry Beasley around North False Creek in those neighborhoods. Many years were spent looking at tower podium here. But there was a seminal moment in Vancouver's planning history when a number of very prominent urbanists, including Patrick Condon, Joyce Drohan, I believe Bing Tom perhaps, all thought that we could invent something different here, a mid-rise paradigm. And I think the urban design rationale for that in terms of city form, city making, was that the historical context here, it was industrial. So low ambient kind of scale, bigger buildings, bigger floor plates, in some ways trying to hold on to that pattern a bit while converting this to a mixed-use neighborhood. So we were successful with the mayor and council of the day. It was Mayor Larry Campbell actually, who instructed City Manager Judy Rogers to move from a tower podium immediately to a mid-rise idea, and we were off and running to invent something. We hired Norm Hodson to help us with the overall urban framework here. Did a masterful job, again, with the daunting timeline, but then following Norm and his good work with PWL Landscape Architects, we had a series of other architectural and landscape architectural practices. I do want to mention them. For the row of buildings we're adjacent to now, which we call the middle row of buildings, we had Merrick Architecture and a number of their associates drawing on 3 separate buildings, 3 separate blocks actually. The back row buildings fronting First Avenue were GBL Architects, the very colorful buildings that you're seeing now. Of course, the salt building, the historic salt building, is Acton Ostry, doing a wonderful job with the restoration of that building. And then on the front row, we can look over at the False Creek Community Center here. And that was Walter Frankel with Arthur Erickson and Nick Milkovich doing a single-loaded LEED Platinum building with a pub, and a daycare as a mixed-use idea. As we're here, let me just tell the brief story of our birds. Miffanwe's first idea was sort of a big cast bronze wall speaking to the history of the place and first growth forest, and but came back with a second idea, Old World Sparrows, that we see here today, which really tell the story, the narrative of how the sparrows were imported from Europe, from the old country, and have continually wreaked havoc on North American ecological systems ever since. And she wanted to, by inverting the scale, tell the story of their presence, and should we not be sustainable, what happens when it's only the sparrows and the cockroaches who are left on this earth. And so these have become quite popular. They're great photo-worthy kind of moments here in the landscape. What we see here in the village as we pan around, we see again mid-rise buildings with a ground floor commercial, high volume, I'll note, commercials. So the proportionality of these buildings was highly designed with a datum point that kind of set the first of what is, as you can begin to see, a bit of a tripartite expression. So a lower commercial kind of zero lot line base with with coffee, with the liquor store, which was the first tenant here, bank, medical, but most importantly, as we trace around to the east side, we see a drugstore, and then further to the southeast, a grocery store. And we were able to negotiate under the tenancy agreement with Millennium, the developer, and mandate a grocery store. And what we have found in our placemaking and towards resilient, complete communities is that if we can get the grocery store, the drugstore will come with it economically. From what we know, they're doing quite well, and they anchor this place in terms of a walkable community, with everything you need certainly within a 5-minute kind of radius. As we look also at these buildings that frame the plaza, essentially the width of the plaza is set by the width of the salt building and the width of the street right-of-ways either side. And so that begins to give us a breadth of the plaza. And so in making sure that we get sun on this plaza, that informs the height, the parapet height of these buildings before we start to step back for what we call sky townhouses. If we look up here, we can see an area, some new multi-level typology, penthouse typologies on top of these podiums on both sides. In fact, on the west side here is another good example. They've not exacerbated scale. They're hardly noticed. In fact, they're probably better at framing and giving a little complexity and variety to these building types. So with that, I think maybe we'll start to walk a bit, and I'll speak as we're walking. The plaza, of course, with the shipyard thematic, we see a lot of secondary features recalling the history of the place. We did an interpretive program that, so the word canoes would have come out of some historical research, but an interpretive program combined with and informing a wonderful public realm plan produced by PWL Landscape Architects that helped us understand where to embed memory and set up for cultural expression and ceremony. We didn't have a constituency down here to design with or for. We had a steering committee, the False Creek, Southeast False Creek Stewardship Group, which really helped us raise our game. Citizens and leaders who were interested in this becoming a showcase of best sustainability practices, but we didn't really have residents or business owners otherwise. And so this first layer of kind of interpretive expression here is intended to give some meaning and identity to the place, but it's not intended to be complete. So one of the things we think about in terms of cultural resiliency or social resiliency as communities begin to form is this idea of placeholding for expression to come or contribution to come. And so there are a number of ways we've left room in the design of the plaza, of the public realm, of the streets and the waterfront for this community to continue to contribute their own particular identity and artful contribution. We're very excited by that. We lifted the entire site up, and we're standing at the high point right now just north of the salt building, somewhere in the order of 3 to 4 feet. So for those that visit and go to the south end of the salt building, you'll see it lifted up with a sort of a skirt detail floating in light at night that really shows you how much we had to lift the land up to get positive drainage of stormwater collection on the public realm through gravity. So the high point here, we shed about, wait for this vehicle here turning. We've designed it to work with all sorts of modes and times of loading and whatnot. But it's interesting to note that one of our main principles, demonstrated sustainability, meant that we wanted to showcase the story of water. And so we raised the center of the village up here at the salt building. We shed water. We shed 1/3 of the stormwater collection into a bioswale at the east here along Ontario Street. And then the other 2/3 will shed to the west into our urban wetland, which will be one of the features on our stop. So we'll see that in a moment. But just to know that we had to actually manipulate grade to ensure that through gravity we could see water moving through as part of a larger system. So why don't we walk down Walter Hardwick here. So this is a demonstration street named after Walter Hardwick, who was an urban geographer at UBC, quite influential, one of our historic City of Vancouver councillors, and in fact part of TEAM, the election actors movement, I think if I got that right, who were very instrumental in bringing the kind of planning practices, enlightened planning practices along under Director of Planning at the time, Ray Spaxman. So high emphasis on public engagement, community consultation, on urban design as the first lens to incentivize best practices and really reward through density and height and a larger array of uses projects that do well, that are neighborly, that are livable, contribute contextually. So that all happened back during Ray's tenure, and we've been iterating that, really working hard at that for now many, many years. And what's important about that is that by using urban design as that first lens, it helps you understand through testing, exploration testing with the market in a collegial, creative way, how far you can push a site, but also what the limits of that site are, hence what is the capacity and role of that site in serving the greater good, while also being quite viable in the marketplace. So we use urban design to initiate that conversation, and it's through urban design that we actually discipline the land cost. If we did not use urban design evaluation and performance, we would see an unfettered, as we're actually beginning to see now in Vancouver, an unfettered escalation in land costs because urban design is perhaps not quite as important. And so I want to really emphasize that urban design is our friend in that respect. So we look down Walter Hardwick here, a special street, a narrow street, our West Coast Canadian version of a Vunurf. We see no curbs. We probably see too many bollards here still, a pedestrian emphasized street. We have the ability, as we're seeing here this morning, with loading movements through lay-bys, but essentially a flush environment, zero lot line buildings either side. Again, as I mentioned, two different architectural practices involved here. This building that I'm pointing to here that fronts onto the plaza, that's a really interesting typology. It's a single loaded, you can see the exterior unheated, unair conditioned circulation, but double fronting onto the plaza, so good through ventilation. You'll see the stair towers here, very expressive and unheated, and one of the things we tried to do throughout the village is position all of the vertical circulation, the elevators, the cores, and the exit stairs in a way that were really prominent, in a way extroverting these buildings, including the lobbies, so that at night the stairs and the elevators and the lobbies and the corners were illuminated, particularly with our low seasonal light, but also to improve CPTED, enhance CPTED crime prevention through environmental design performance here. So the buildings are careful not to impose glare, but they're contributing in a way to the nighttime urban landscape, very positive way. But what's also interesting about this site that we're looking at now is that while the corner building fronting the plaza was market, this other building here is a non-market building. So in Vancouver, we've always tried to make sure that any of the social housing, non-market housing, in this case we have a couple of family housing buildings and singles oriented buildings, that they don't look like the poor cousin to the market building. So this is just to say that we can mix tenure within buildings. We don't have this thing called a pour door, if you will. It's a distinguished entry here, distinguished entry on the other side. All of the parking is below ground, disguised, minimal impact on the public realm, small crossings, all those things we want to do to really emphasize the pedestrian priority here. As we look down the street, we can see just the ease of movement with pedestrians. One of the benefits of designing and building so much urban fabric at one moment in time is that we can actually set out secondary passages, pedestrian passages and rights of way through the site to permeate through the fabric of the site, and in some cases even set those in their location in a way that can frame other features in the distance. So we're going to come up here on an informal muse, and by the way, all of these buildings with their additional, by being smaller buildings, and four-sided buildings, we have marketable frontage, ground-oriented residential frontage on all sides. So here's a great little informal, it's public muse. As we move towards the center here and look towards the creek, we can see this lovely little passage. I believe this one is framing the historic W on the Woodward's Tower. I'd like to say that's entirely by design, but it's coincidental. I have to fess up here. But it's a just a wonderful way to kind of keep you oriented to the in this case the seawall and to the city of the North Shore by opening up through the fabric. As we pan back to the south, this way through the same alignment here, same corridor. This was absolutely designed. We positioned the Playhouse lobby right on access to this corridor. We wanted to make sure that the glow of the lobby and particularly when there are events going on, people filled that this is a magnet, kind of an activator. And so we have this dual kind of thing going on here between the Playhouse and Woodward's and the creek and the downtown that draws you into both of these little corridor systems. So as we move on, we're appreciating zero lot line again. The idea here was to push the buildings all the way to their periphery, freeing up as much cross-sectional dimension within the courtyards as we could possibly muster. So we're going to go down here and go through a courtyard here in a moment, and just appreciate how these typical blocks are organized. We'll go right here into this, and maybe I'll get you to pan up here just a little bit so you can get a sense that what we wanted to make sure was that this read as a public or semi-public courtyard. So it wanted to be inviting. So the scale of the opening was actually really important. A little invitation of sound through the water feature. Again, stormwater all captured on site, on the private sites as well, working with the Durante Kruk landscape architects for all the private sites. But a sense that this is a place for the public to wander in and enjoy. So let's just do that. So as I mentioned, we have these typical full block typologies, urban blocks, if you will, and we have a series of those. Some are at grade. We're obviously at grade now, but the same typology also sits on top of the grocery store, or the drugstore or the liquor store site. So this same experience, just a little bit closer to the sun, is the sort of DNA or kind of morphology that we see. As we look up this little path here, this is actually covering the ramp volume down to parking below. So making this a landscape feature or disguise, high quality rusticated architecture here. So we look up the spine of water here in this semi-public courtyard, and we see great light this morning, I should say first, looking up what is the market building. And you see the seam of the building that you're panning up now. That of course is where the lobby is. It allows for cross ventilation. All of the lobbies and some of the actual corridors are splayed to promote cross and longitudinal through ventilation towards passive performance, and extra wide exit stairs and other features around lobbies so that people can congregate and have social exchange, build social capital, build community within these buildings. So again, the buildings are organized so that we see people within the buildings. Here is a typical block that has 4 or 5 different typologies. We saw the kind of double-loaded building on the west here we were just looking at, but here on the north we see a different kind of typology that's about a kind of a butterfly plan with private elevators that open to the sides. As we pan to the right here, we see a bit of a break between these buildings, and this is part of the idea of permeability, so that as pedestrians wander in, they intuitively understand that you can move through this space and out to the corners where there's always a non-gated opening. And in some cases we're even able to frame that opening with something that's got some light, like a stair tower or at least a ground-oriented entry beyond. So as we pan around again, we see another building here on the east, and then finally the lower building here, which of course is lower to bring sun into the courtyard. It's also an interesting building. We had this idea of external streets, and so we see that up here with a series of entries that are part of a horizontal sort of access system, again wanting to motivate social collisions, and so the cumulative effect is 4 or 5 different typologies that all kind of work together as an ensemble of buildings that promote social connectivity while making for a really pleasant courtyard with great light and showcasing on-site stormwater collection. We have cisterns in the parkades that help us do that as well. Why don't we walk out through the courtyard to the west here, and you know, we're seeing now 10 years of tree maturity and more to come, and so we'll have this beautiful array of trees with seasonal color coming. We've got this wonderful green here, contemplative spot. So you know, this is a new typology for Vancouver, designing a mid-rise block at that scale, at the block scale, and in a way that's really, they're highly composed, and it's about something greater than the sum of the parts. And what I think we really like about this morphology is you could have multiple design authors playing here. It doesn't have to be the same architectural expression, because of the larger idea of the block form. It can enjoy, you know, different ideas about architectural ideas about the building. So we're going to actually walk back south, but as we look north, we see on the corner here, this is the signature building that's also playing to this nautical kind of shipyard theme. There are a series of motifs and patterns, scallops, shiplap, offsets that are kind of playing on you, all quite intentional. And this building, as a signature building, did most of the heavy lifting on the performa. So we're going to move across now into the urban wetland. So this is this Hinge Park which is being really well used today. We can just see the families now that the sun is sort of making its way here. This is a teachable park. It's trying to tell us about the ethics of sustainability. Again, a place of capturing stormwater. When we divert the stormwater, it flows into a serpentine urban wetland that with biofiltration, and then it discharges on the waterfront, which we'll show in a moment. That's one feature, but we have a cistern, we capture the water. You can even see the kids here, and this is great. We can see this is not staged. We're seeing the kids play with some stormwater release there. So there's a weir system that you can see, this kind of cascading weir system that, and look at the kid in the red. They're walking down the weir with mom. We have a lot of salvaged materials here from the excavation that we've rewoven, including old rail tracks and from a spur, an aesthetic here that's about kind of an industrial past in a way, but rethought, reimagined in contemporary design language. This sort of open site here, undeveloped site, actually was to be the elementary school for Southeast Falls Creek, and that's, I think, still being rethought a bit. But looking to the north here, we just get a real sense of the sweep of kind of urbanism in Vancouver around Falls Creek. I like to think about Southeast Falls Creek, if we were to imagine Vancouver's urbanism in software release terms, it's sort of around 5.0 or so. I won't go through the other versions, and we're now on to 6.0, 7.0. My hope is that for the final neighborhood, and I'll note that I think the buildings are pretty big here. They're pretty, one could argue a bit bulky. Perhaps a little bit too much density that for enough articulation to make it work. But again, this is a commitment to deliver this project for the Olympics. But if we look to the west, the final neighborhood called the Workshard neighborhood, where the city Workshard is, we might reimagine that in a way that the ODP suggests, the approved official development plan, which is about much more finer grained, incremental, complex work-live, live-work, smaller typologies, as still as dense, but just a more finely articulated fabric to give some complexity. So we can see, this unbelievable intergenerational exchange and support here, and what living in the city should be like, and it's obviously a perfect early fall morning, but this is all designed. This is all intended to work like this. This play space in the sun, while at the same time, in addition to showcasing water, we'll talk about district energy here in a moment. Food I've mentioned, housing in terms of resiliency, trying to get mixed tenure in housing, but also ecological resiliency. And so as we move further west here, we're going to see a key part of the teachable landscape, which is our urban wetland, and this idea of rewilding the city, which we're all familiar with. But we've enjoyed it in some cases in a challenging way, as we've had beavers in here building dams and damming up this wetland, and we've had to do some remedial. We've had to negotiate with the beavers just how we allow them to still coexist while not flooding the place. But a number of herons and eagles and of course ducks and geese, and just a wonderful way to experience the city. We see a duck over here on this rock over here, I think. My eyes are, but a landscape that just reminds us of really not just our humanity, but the importance of being custodians for ecological health, and to have that embedded in a highly urban setting as a teachable park space is the big gift of this place. And so the Parks Board, we applaud, and my counterpart at the Parks Board, Thilo Driesen, among others. Again, many involved in this. This is PWL as well. And then as we move to the west here, we're coming, as I mentioned, we still have another third of this park to complete the sweep, which will come. So we'll see another couple of large buildings that complete the frame in a mini Central Park kind of way, that give shape and scale to the park. Right now, temporarily, we have the dog park here and urban agriculture. We're storing a couple of important heritage houses. We still have some heritage buildings to work with. We had 5 in the neighborhood, all precious and identified in the official development plan, and so far so good. We've been able to work with all of them. But as we then move to the waterfront here, and we, again see this kind of layering of ecological habitat against, one of the most urban environments, certainly in North America, we begin to appreciate what the importance of design, particularly urban design, working with the market creatively, working with the stakeholders creatively, what we can actually do here. And what I also think is valuable about Southeast False Creek is that it tells us how to do that kind of work. And if we can take just a little bit of this through careful, thoughtful design and take that out to the outer neighborhoods within the city, all the more resilient they will be, because we begin to co-locate food systems, we locally manage water, we begin to think about how energy might be deployed more systematically across the city, and we put the right kind of housing at the right scale in the right place, and we shape those places, those little communities. There's an idea of a 5-minute city pattern that's been much talked about, and what's interesting about that is that the former streetcar grid of the city in situ naturally sets out that kind of pattern of proximity and location shaped around arterial commercial intersections and corridors. And so we have that kind of framework really staring us in the face to do better with and introduce greater capacity. Perhaps opportunities for larger projects in the right place, but the lower ambient quality of our outer neighborhoods is, as we discussed at the beginning, with this being a former industrial site demanding its own urban design idea, the outer neighborhoods are not dissimilar. They have a different idea to be thought about and enjoyed. So we're going to walk across here, and I'm just going to tell a quick little story. It's my favorite story to tell about Southeast False Creek, and it's the story that I think cinched our win with the LifeCom Award again in the fall of 2010 in Chicago, when we presented the Olympic Village in Southeast False Creek. So what we see here at a bit of low tide here is the location where we're discharging the stormwater collection that's filtrated through the urban wetland. We see an island here. See someone pumping something up here, about ready to go out onto the water. This island was manufactured. It was built as really the first phase of the project, along with the seawall, so that we could enjoy the experience of watching this 1 million plus square feet, over $1 billion project come out of the ground. But the big story here to complete is that we had a principle in the official development plan called demonstrated sustainability, and that meant showcase the capture of a drop of, one idea would be to showcase the capture of a drop of stormwater, show its conveyance, show its discharge, show the design. In this case, the kind of south shoreline, which you see is quite different given the kind of solar aspect and the kind of bioaquatics that are necessary to bring habitat back. Well, this design, the inlet, the whole system, brought back herring to the creek for the first time in, we understand, about 60 years. So we started to see herring show up here in this little inlet, and that's true today. And then a few years later, we were visited by I'm going to point here, we were visited by a gray whale. So the gray whale came in, and this is before 2010, and it swam all the way to the end of the creek to Science World. We understood it may have no plankton, but a little bit of herring, you know, maybe the hors d'oeuvre. And then it came back the next day. So the story there is the official development plan approved, council approved principle of demonstrated stormwater, demonstrated best practices, in this case the capture of a stormwater. Through that we motivated the herring, and it was the herring that brought back the gray whale on the second day. So I think what we want to do now is move, as we conclude the tour, over to the Southeast Falls Creek Energy Center. So here we are on Spyglass under the Canby Bridge at the site of the Falls Creek Energy Center, or Southeast Falls Creek Energy Center. This is Vancouver's first foray into district energy, made possible by, as a business case, given the amount of heating capacity we were booting up associated with the 2010 games. My understanding is there was no cold showers during the Olympics or the Paralympics, so that's a good stat to remember. It's nestled in, inserted in under the Canby Street Bridge, under the south bridgehead coming out of the downtown. As we can see over to the west, it's immediately adjacent to multifamily ground-oriented housing. When we were doing the public engagement, we had folks like David Suzuki involved on behalf of this community, because there was a concern, rightfully, that our original idea of biomass was going to put some particulate into the atmosphere. And yet the best response, which is sewer heat recovery, which is what we ended up implementing, was sort of staring us in the face. You know, if I kind of pan up to that intersection, that's where the kind of collision of a couple of big sewer trunk lines are located. I call that particular position, given that this system is all about drawing heat off of raw sewage, I call that intersection the confluence of effluents. I apologize for that, but I had to work that one in. The confluence of effluents. But it allowed us to build this amazing award-winning facility. Walter Frankel Architects won a Governor General's Award architecturally for this project, which again, it's a teachable facility. It showcases the kind of guts of what sewer heat recovery looks like. You're only seeing about, probably about a third of the volumetric capacity, with most of how this place works underground, including a bunch of boilers. As we walk over here to the corner, I want to, again, a clever building that's kind of taking advantage of what would have been a derelict site, and what that's allowed us to do is to set up a weather-protected promenade under the Canby Bridge, which has more to come in terms of public art and lighting. The underbelly of the Canby Bridge is beautiful for projecting. We had a Nettie Wild piece on the north side a couple of years ago, speaking to the history of salmon, with some beautiful projected light and color. So there's lots of opportunity here to play with this really interesting lineal space here. But let's kind of conclude over here by the by what are called the stacks, and this is an interesting feature of the project that actually hasn't been very well publicized, but I'll tell a little bit about it. So as we can see and start to look up, we see a series of stacks that at the top are completed by LED panels. Each panel is about 1 meter wide by 3 meters high. We work closely with, again, with Walter's firm, but also with Stephanie Robb to really think about an expression of energy consumption using energy efficient light. And so when you look up and see those stacks, particularly during the winter months, they're telling the story of energy for everyone that's on the system. And so we have a computer program that in real time is assessing the consumptive habits, and then not unlike the scarlet letter for motorists that are driving back and forth on the Cambie Bridge or otherwise, if people are piggish, these are trending towards a red and orange kind of hue. But if people are dialed down, they're more blue-green. And so that's just real-time, 24/7, 365 expression. It's a bit subtle, syncopathic. You know, there's some features that are programmed in depending on peaks and spikes sort of thing. The story that I like to tell, and how I'll conclude the tour today, is that we can take those LED panels offline. We can do that for ceremony, special events, whatever we want to do. There was a year that, as in most years, the breast cancer run for the cure passes across the Cambie Bridge at this location on a weekend. And so I called down here to speak to the engineer, and I said, is there any possibility that we might dial up the fingernails to the particular Pantone magenta color on the Breast Cancer Run for the Cure website this weekend? Because we want to celebrate the cure all weekend. And you know, the initial reaction was, you know, what? And then I get a call back like 5 minutes later from this wonderful engineer, City of Vancouver Engineering. He says, I've gone to the website, I've found that color, I've matched it to a Pantone color, here it is, and this is like at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Will this work? And I said, oh my God, you're my hero. So for that year, we glowed Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, that Pantone color on these panels. The next year, for Breast Cancer Run for the Cure, I cold called the technician for our soccer stadium, because it has a prismatic transom with all the lighting effects. And then Science World as well, with the geodesic dome ordnance, which are also lights. And then of course where we started, the ship ribs for the Olympic Village Plaza. And we put all 4 of those sites onto that Pantone color for the Breast Cancer Run for the Cure weekend. So we had pink False Creek to support and celebrate Breast Cancer Run for the Cure. A wonderful way to use the urban environment, and particularly urban lighting strategy as celebration and ceremony. So with that, I'll close off the tour and just thank you all for attending. I wish you could have been here, because this is an unbelievable day. We dialed up the right day for this. And for those that haven't seen the Olympic Village, I hope you'll have a chance to make the same walk sometime. And it's been a real pleasure telling a few stories about a place that really took a village by many, many contributors to make this work and make it happen. So thank you very much.